Okay, so it is Thanksgiving 2009, and I am at my parents' house, which is in a woodsy part of Princeton, New Jersey. I'm laptoping, I'm doing a little laundry. I walk across the den to throw the whites in the dryer. I look down, and I see on the floor a snake, which is a crisis, because I am phobic of snakes, and this is a snake in the house. Now, a phobia isn't like, ew, gross snakes, I hate snakes. Ugh. A phobia is an irrational and excessive fear that produces a very real physical sensation. And the sensation is that you are going to die. Now, phobics know that they're irrational, but it doesn't matter, because when you feel like you're going to die, that's like an irrelevant detail. So I go shooting up the kitchen stairs, which I don't remember at all. It's common for phobics to black out. And my heart is racing, and I'm sweating, and I am trying to figure out what to do. And I do what people do in natural disasters. I tweet about it. And it generates a lot of suggestions. The most common suggestion is that I should get the fuck out of the house. All right, like there's some logic to that, I get that. But my thinking is a little bit different. My thinking is that if I don't keep an eye on the snake, it will slither behind a bookcase, we'll lose track of it, and I will never be able to return to my parents' house. So I call our neighbors, who are Princeton University biologists. The husband tells me to get a mongoose, and the wife tells me to get a drink. I call my parents at work, and they are completely unmoved, which is weird because they're both phobics. My mom is afraid of heights, and my dad is terrified of chickens. And in our family, that's not that weird. My paternal grandmother was phobic of mice, and so is my mom's sister. I used to love to tell my aunt that my phobia eats her phobia for lunch. But it kind of raises an interesting question, like, are phobias inherited? And it turns out that nobody really knows. Literature is filled with phrases like, many psychologists believe, or it may also be true. What we do know is that about 10 million people a year in the US suffer from phobias, and women report them more often than men, but psychologists think that men use alcohol more often to mask them. Now, there are a bunch of common phobias: snakes, spiders, heights. Less common is the fear of farting in public, but this is what it's called, fartophobia with a PH, which I guess makes it more scientific. So my own phobia has no origin story. There wasn't like a bad incident with a snake, but even as a young child, I was afraid of holding Ranger Rick magazine because I might open to a picture of a snake and touch it. Oh. Now, my phobia is fairly specific. It's the shape of their heads and the way they move that really skeeves me out. A friend of mine doesn't like the sheen of their skin. That doesn't bother me that much, but I wouldn't really want to touch snakeskin shoes, which is weird because, I like shoes. But a much more serious problem are those squiggles on the ground. Now, to you, those things look like twigs. But to me, they look like snakes, and I have to be on alert all the time. Now, remember that physical fear of dying is very, very real. So it doesn't matter if those twigs are poisonous or not. I could die from stepping near one. And that's a lot to live with, given all the twigs on the ground. So about 15 years ago, I called up a therapist to get a little help. And he said there were two ways that we could go through this. He could lock me in a room with a snake for 2 hours, and I would be cured. Right. Or he could expose me to snakier and snakier things, and that would work. So pictures and then rubber snakes and so forth. I chose the latter. And basically the therapy worked, but it faded over time. So now if I were planning a trip to, say, the Amazon, which I would never do because of all the snakes, I would go through that therapy again and kind of build up the resistance. But in the meantime, I live with the phobia, which brings us back to my parents' kitchen, where I decide to take my neighbor's advice and I drink my way through Thanksgiving weekend, which is pretty effective because I tend to nap a lot and everybody thinks I'm just drifting off when in fact I'm passing out constantly. But because I have tweeted about the event, I continue to get comments from people. And when I say people, I mean men who tell me that I'm being irrational. And they have two ways they like to tell me. One is they say, it's more afraid of you than you are of it. Peak irrelevance, right? Nobody ever says to a claustrophobe, that elevator is more afraid of you than you are of it, right? And the other thing that people really like to say when you're having a phobic experience is that you're overreacting. So here I am, I'm having the experience that I'm dying. And here they are telling me I'm overreacting. There's like a little bit of a gap. So I like to close that gap when people tell me I'm overreacting by saying, Of course I am, asshole. That's the point. Thanks very much.